like this, man. He like a butterfly flapping his wings deep down in the forest, man. They're gonna cause a tree fall like 5,000 miles away, man. There ain't nobody seeing nobody. Man, it seems like you don't even know, man. It's like you're born into this world, man. And you got like that, man. The dust and wind, man. Or like a dang old candle, man. It don't matter, man. These old things.
All right, Stormy Waters, welcome back to the Jay Burden Show. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me back. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. It's hard to believe this is only the third time you've appeared on my show, and now a little over a year. But you and I have been talking in the background for a long time, and the two of us together have kind of concocted something that I think is worth discussing. I mean, you sort of came up with a name for it right before we went live, the Republican Samson option. Before we get into it, because I know I'm going to get comments, yes, I know my audio isn't as good. I'm traveling, I'm on the road. And so instead of my normal studio, which is just a spare bedroom, and my normal microphone, I'm on AirPods in an Airbnb. But nonetheless, I thought this was important enough to get into it. So a little bit of background, and then I'll toss it to Stormy. I've been really confused for a while about the term woke right, because in my mind, I couldn't figure out why it still had legs, because it was really stupid. It didn't make sense. It wasn't a good meme. It was lazily employed that everyone really other than arch-Zionist conservative warmongers was woke right. Like Scott Horton and Thomas 777 have almost nothing in common except for the fact that they are both quote unquote woke right. Oh, I guess they both know Daryl Cooper, so maybe they have something in common. But in all seriousness, I couldn't really figure it out. And this particularly relates to the figure of one Jim Lindsay. Obviously, to me, it seemed that he realized that the woke left grift was up. He needed something new to justify his position. But I couldn't figure out why he was so aggressively going after everyone, making himself completely unpopular. Until I realized something. Particularly, I realized this with Tucker's turn, or at least Tucker's dramatic turn on Israel, because I realized there was an equivocation being set up. Tucker is woke right. Okay, that makes sense. There's a desire to paint him and anyone else, questioning the foreign policy establishment with that label. All right, fair enough. But then more pieces started to fall into place. Obviously, you had Nick Fuentes appearing on Tucker, which created a massive flip out, and he was woke right. And then it became Nick Fuentes has got your kids. He has not just your kids, but Republican staffers, anyone new and upcoming in your organization. They're associated with Fuentes. They're woke right. Not only that, but Tucker, he's woke right. And you know who's connected all of this? Vice President J.D. Vance. So that's a weird kind of crimson thread there, if you will, building out the conspiracy map. And then there were more details sort of associated with it. For instance, if you remember during the sort of homosexually named Operation Midnight Hammer, all of the criticism was being directed towards Vance and Hegseth. Again, an interesting point. Now, other things started to fall into place. First, I noticed that, if you remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene decided not to run. She's in a safe seat, right? Sure, she's been feuding with the president, but there's no reason to assume she'd lose her primary. She's relatively popular. And you start to look at it and you're saying, like, well, wait a minute. Why is she dropping out? Why is she retiring, at least for the moment, from politics? And another point, and Stormy, you and I have been talking about this behind the scenes. Why didn't the GOP try in Virginia? I mean, look, like it would have been a tough race no matter what. But at least according to my behind the scenes sources, there were other much better candidates, people who could have made a really good run of it instead of Wilson Earl Sears, who a year and a half ago, anyone with a brain told you had no chance of winning. You have a Republican governor that was massively popular, almost a 60% approval rating in a purple state, which is very good, and still had that in exit polling. And yet his designated successor lost by, an absurd margin of victory, even with any number of, prominent scandals like Jay Jones saying, I'm going to kill your kids. So I couldn't figure out why. Like, why isn't the Republican Party trying? Why are they almost deliberately sort of sabotaging themselves? And so my theory, and after I've finished outlining this, I'll kick it back to Stormy, is basically this is a struggle for the GOP after Trump. And in my mind, I think what we're seeing is the neoconservatives trying to regain control of the party. Now, look, Trump is obviously sort of slavishly devoted to our strongest ally, right? That no one needs to type that out in the comments. I'm aware. But what's interesting to me is obviously the old neocons are not happy with the populist direction of the party. They're particularly uninterested in letting J.D. Vance, who is associated with a different group, right, the sort of tech elite, anywhere near the helm. I think it's what is likely to me is it seems as if the Republican Party or a faction within it is deliberately trying to sabotage their chances at elections. Why would they do that? Well, to be honest, it seems as if, and you can see this from even figures like Brill and Hollyhand, who I do hope will come on my podcast. I've sent him a nice email, but he wrote a piece about the woke right. And what did he say? Well, he didn't say much. He's 19. He's not particularly intelligent anyway. But what he basically said is the woke right is going to cost us elections. That is what's going to happen if these voices are allowed. If we don't do what Mark Levin said, which is cancel them, the same way we canceled Joe Sobran, the same way we canceled Sam Francis, the same way we canceled Pat Buchanan, they're going to cost us an election. So what happens? Let's say an election is lost and badly, which it is likely to be, given current trends, given the ineffectual nature of the Trump administration. They are going to be punished. And I will say, I think it is unlikely that people flip. I think people will just stay home, similar to what happened with the Conservative Party in the UK. But I think that there will be, whether manufactured or not, an electoral crisis for the GOP. They'll get smashed hard. And what will be the narrative? The narrative will be, oh, we let ourselves get too extreme. The same extreme that we saw on the woke left has now appeared on our side, the woke right. And it's time to clean house. We've seen it happen before. Now, admittedly, the state of play has changed. The neocons are nowhere near as ascendant as they were 30 years ago. They're going to give a run of it. They're definitely going to give a run of it. And I think the motivation is twofold, which is one, to sort of nip what they see to be a real threat to their control in the bud, a new burgeoning interest group, the tech elite, with people like, again, who I don't like, but are not necessarily synonymous with the Zionist cause. People like Thiel, people like the backers behind Vance. And so to me, I think that is the move. I think figures like Jimbo, Corky, as he's been affectionately labeled, is auditioning. He is auditioning for the Bill Buckley role, the man who decides what is acceptable within discourse and not. Another person auditioning for that role is one Barry Weiss, who you may remember managed to get nearly $500 million for a Substack. Okay, it's a popular Substack, but it is not that big. I believe now she's at the head of ABC. And she said something this morning, I sent it to a group chat that we share, Stormy, that she wants to, in her words, define the, quote, 40 yards of acceptable discourse, the narrow band. And she wants to kick off people like Tucker, like Nick, like Hassan, who, okay, fair enough, isn't my favorite guy in the world, but kick them off and replace them with, to quote her, highly charismatic figures like Alan Dershowitz, an 88-year-old man deeply connected to Jeffrey Epstein, who defended himself from allegations that he was on those flights by saying, yes, I did get a massage, but I kept my underwear on, and described the person on the Lolita Express who gave him said massage as a old woman named Olga. Don't know if I believe that. So that is what I see happening. I see that effectively the conservatives are acting how they always do, which is the hook trailing behind the left, designed to scoop up any stragglers, designed to keep you back on the plantation, as it were. And so anyway, Stormy, I realized I brought you on my show and then ranted at you for 10 unbroken minutes. But I figured I'd at least set out what I see happening.
Well, it's a good thing I agree with you, because this is from everything I hear, it is exactly what's happening. And to put it back, to rewind it back earlier into your monologue, which was a very good one. What do all those figures have in common, right? The people that all of a sudden sprouted up with this terrible, terrible meme like woke right. And you said like, why they landed on this particular turn of phrase, it's confusing, because it's a terrible meme out of the gate. But all of the people that they have on their back bench, Brett Weinstein, James Lindsay, Joel Berry, actually the entire institution of the Babylon Bee, they all got famous for combating woke in the first place. In fact, woke is the only thing that they have as a claim to fame. The only relevance they have in the discourse at all is being experts at diagnosing wokeness. So if all you had were these fine gentlemen, woke would be the only direction you could go.
Censorship.
You're very welcome. That's the only direction you can take if these are the people that you have in your toolbox, which would have been weird. Like, okay, maybe they came up with this themselves. They have like little meetings about how do we stay relevant and get my my ad bucks for what is it? What is that supplement brand they all push? I can't remember. Anyways, but then Benjamin Netanyahu, on several occasions, comes out, one of it to Congress, the other one to PBS, I believe, or something like that. He goes, you know what the problem is with your American political dialogue right now? It's this woke right. You guys have a real woke right problem. I was like, all right. Once, maybe. I don't know who runs his Twitter, but maybe somebody told them about it. But like 4 or 5 times, again, like almost the point where he's like directing the discourse for him to talk about it. And the plan, the Samson option of the Republican Party. Hollyhand is not the only one that has penned such an article saying that if in the event we lose an election, maybe this most coming up, it is going to be the fault of these people and no other. And then shortly after that, you have the New York Times giving what I can only describe as fellatio to Nicholas J. Fuentes. Twice? Was it 2 cover stories? And the New York Times knows how to make you look ugly. They are specialists in it. And they must have dug for weeks to find the one flattering photo where Nick Fuentes looks like, chisel-chinned Chad in a leather jacket. It's kind of funny, because right at the same time as Tucker drops the interview, less than 6 hours later, that cover story was loaded up in the hopper, ready to go. Came out the same day, which is odd. Right? And if you think about, because, all right, what was the first like 120 days of the Trump administration like? It was just bangers after bangers. It was really good. The Trump first 90 days of Trump 2.0 was fun. Like, everyone we hated cried. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And then it got really, really, really gay really quickly. And it was almost like Trump was, because In order for the Republicans to lose, in order for this plan to work, you have to basically turn the base against Donald Trump, because you can't wait till 2028. You have to do 2026. It has to be the midterms. Because two things. One, if you let Trump and Vance do Trump and Vance stuff till 2028, you have a de facto, 1,000-year Vance Reich. It's happening. All right. If you just sat back and didn't, do things, and how you would do those things, I'll get into in a moment, with some interesting news that was broken on the Inquisition podcast. The other thing you would have to do is make sure that this didn't go very wrong for you, because the other people that hate our Middle Eastern allies as much as probably the woke right does is like the crazy left, which is now also ascendant in the Democratic Party. So you wouldn't want to toss a big election, right? Like, let's say 2028, and give it to, the libtards. You would want to do the midterms, because if the Republicans lose the midterms, what it does is create a locked government, right? So like, because it won't happen in the Senate. It'll only happen in the House. So you basically have paralyzed the Congress. So those crazed, Palestinoid people, they can't really do any damage, because you want them to rise, but only in so much as you want Republicans in the Senate to fall down, in Congress to fall down, right? You don't want like a leftoid sweep, or else you're just in just as much trouble, but the opposite direction. But now, how do you make Trump lose the base? Well, who gets control of what Trump does and who Trump sees? That's Miss Susie Wiles. Who is Miss Susie Wiles? Well, Miss Susie Wiles is the former campaign director of the same guy that was on TV talking about the woke right, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of a place in the Middle East. So wait a second. The guy that's worried about the woke right the most, and, Jay, I'll toss it back to you here momentarily, because I know you are a James Lindsay expert. It is a personal fascination of yours, not just his appearance, which is by itself fascinating, or that, he has an open marriage and literally sits in a cuck chair. Has children with OnlyFans. I mean, like the fascination with James Lindsay, can really tumble one down a rabbit hole. But in particular, to his connections or in his ascent to the same nation to which Susie Wiles directed the campaign of its current incumbent head of state. So Susie Wiles, as broken on the Inquisition podcast by one Daryl Cooper, also known as Martyr Maid, excellent podcast, everyone should be following already, that Susie Wiles is basically running who gets to see Trump, who doesn't get to see Trump, what Trump does, what Trump doesn't do. And if anyone wants like an ad hoc, like, can he squeeze me into the schedule? For that to happen, you need to give Susie Wiles $40,000 to her foundation. Or if you want repeated access to the president, you can get a discount if you buy 12 months all at once, for a total and a bargain at $200,000. So, okay, we're going to, and if what could be, said about Donald Trump is true, that he will literally repeat the opinions of whoever the last person he was talking about or talking to, you could do a lot of damage with that alone. And it seems that people have kind of sussed this out inside the administration. And apparently, as of yesterday, Susie Wiles might be in the hot seat and might get fired by New Year's. So there is, besides Daryl's very founded accusation, there seems to be confirmatory evidence happening in the machinations of the Trump administration. So in order for you to lose the midterms and blow up the Republican Party like the Samson option, you would need a key component of this would be for Trump to lose support of a large enough amount of the base that they stay home. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so several things there. I think it's important to say, and obviously this is sort of implicit in everything you and I have said, Stormy, that we are not like Republican Party guys. Like, look, like I don't really particularly care about the Republican Party per se. I'm not really like emotionally invested in, the GOP. But nonetheless, it does, in my mind, answer several questions, which is one, to me, as soon as Trump won the election, the question is who comes next and how do the new sort of elite groups within the GOP, how do they fight it out? Because early, and I think I was skeptical and then very positive about the first couple months of the Trump administration. No one knew, right? No one knew who was effectively going to come out on top. Because look, like we understand, any political party has multiple factions within it. And for the longest time, Israel was the big dog in the GOP. Obviously, there are other concerns. You look at a guy like Rex Tillerson, he's domestic energy. Okay, he probably likes Israel a good bit, but not 100% synonymous. But this new infusion of tech guys, sort of an interesting thing. Now, I will say, I still think it is up in the air, right? There is a very real possibility that the tech bros went out in this. There are a couple reasons I want to say, that, which is one, let's look at the last time the neocons, and I use that term in the most, I guess, the most insulting way possible. Look at the last time they won out over their opposition. We'll go back to the mid 90s. So look, what was happening then? Okay, one, Cold War was done, and many of the Cold Warriors, Canada included, basically said, all right, war is done. We go back to being a real country again. This is basically what the disagreement was over. Right? Do we continue to have a world empire or are we a country again? Vastly oversimplifying it. And let's look at the position that the neoconservatives were in. If you're looking for reference on this, there's probably 20 minutes at the kind of 2/3 mark of my show with Scott Horton, where we talk about Dick Cheney, where we go over exactly this. Well, the neocons controlled an immense amount of institutions. Okay, they still do from a certain perspective. And as you and I are no doubt aware, Stormy, they have successfully, at least it seems like, reestablished their control over heritage. Now, there are other institutions in which they are not in charge. ISI has made some motions towards our guys. Okay, not necessarily my best friend. I don't love ISI, but that's one. You have others, TPUSA. We could talk about. But point is, okay, so it's not 100% the same. They still have power there, but also the thing that they certainly do not have is media hegemony. Well, look, they have Fox News, and I think it's important to say that it seems as if Fox News is interested in amplifying this because we see across the pond that the Murdoch properties are amplifying the same thing in England. They're trying to present the young English right, nationalists, people who are anti-immigration, as being woke right and connected to Nick Fuentes. Now, I realize, thanks to a new feature rolled out on Twitter, we're aware of the fact that not all of Fuentes' audience is within the contiguous U.S. We understand that. We've understood that for a while. But unless I'm wrong, and I don't think I am, he's not nearly as big of a deal in the UK as he is here. makes sense. It's not really what he talks about. But nonetheless, that is the line they're going with. They're playing the exact same playbook. And, the conservative, quote unquote, media in the UK. Seems as if they're using that, excuse me, as a way to scare off older voters and older donors, both connected to Murdoch. So that's one. Obviously, they control some media, but they're getting pilloried, especially with the under 40 crowd. And I think it's particularly interesting the degree to which they are trying to instill an inbuilt distrust among boomers towards young people, basically saying those young people, the young men trying to work their way into your institutions, are up to no good. They're infiltrators, they're anti-Semites. Because I think that was a clever tactical response to the fact that, to be honest, and even Rod Dreher recognizes this, young GOP staffers are our guys. I mean, there's probably, half a dozen of them listening to what I'm saying now. I've met a good number of them. You hear people say this about,
hello, boys. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, 100%. But I think that's very interesting because I think that they realize that they have a personnel problem. They've lost the youth. And the move they seem to be making is just to say, well, we don't need a youth. We can just cast them out. And I think in their mind, that solves their problem. At best, let's say they get everything they want. The boomers, the older generations are constantly, scrapping their own backbench, constantly, purity spiraling. As Levin say, hell yes, we do cancel culture. Well, okay, that may solve your problem in the short term, but long term, it does not. And so in my mind, ultimately, I do not think they will be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube. I do not think they will be able to win in the same way they won back in the mid 90s. Paul Godfrey has an essay. I'm not sure if it's out yet or not. He sent me an advanced copy, and I do owe him an email thanking him for that, talking about exactly this. You can look at it, Chronicles. Godfrey has written exactly about this any number of times, but basically talking about the fact that the neocons are sort of spent. They don't nearly have the same level of cultural cachet that they used to. They don't have the same level of cultural dominance that they used to. And let's also be honest, they don't have the same level of talent they used to. We have an immense amount of talent, and they're incredibly artificial. We saw this with Shapiro, right? The moment Shapiro actually has to argue, he falls apart because he's not real. He's got an immense amount of backing. He's got an immense amount of advantages you or I might not have. And he's used to fighting, let's be honest, 95 IQ college freshmen, people who don't really have any ideas at all and are here to fight the bad man. And they go up against a fast-talking individual with an Ivy education who can rattle off a few talking points, and they get bodied. But that's not real. It's not a real political dialectic. You saw this when his vain attempt to try to take down Tucker and Fuentes both. He just threw random clips together, no argument, and mean mugged at the camera. So in my mind, they certainly can and likely will succeed in crashing the party in 26 or 28. I see that as being very likely. But as far as actually maintaining like a living conservative movement as much as that exists, to me, that's laughable. It's absurd. I don't see it happening, quite simply because they are offering nothing to a rising generation. And when I mean nothing, I mean literally nothing. Let's acknowledge the fact that at the same time, we are having this woke right discourse. The youth are coming for you. You need to get rid of them. We're also having a discourse about cost of living, right? Ben Shapiro saying you don't have the right to live where you grew up. You don't have the right to your ancestral land. Now, admittedly, I think even he would admit this. He has different feelings about land to which he feels that he has a genetic attachment. Obviously, many have said that. But really, you're doing the exact same thing, ironically enough, that the left did, which is say, young white men need not apply. The only way you can be part of our thing, part of our coalition, is by being gay. And in the left, this is literally gay. On the right, it is gay in a derogatory sense. But nonetheless, you were offering people a horrible deal, a transparently horrible deal. And to me, that's the thing that has really come out of this, which is, look, we understand most people are not particularly politically sophisticated, right? Nerds like us may read books. Most people don't about, 18th century Italian political philosophers. And to be honest, they're probably better for it. But most people act in their self-interest. And when they perceive they're being given a very raw deal, they react accordingly. Look, I'm not a populist. I don't think that there's a people power element, that there will be some sort of 1776. But I think that fundamentally, ruling classes need to be seen as legitimate by the people with which they rule. They need to have a sense of moral alignment. And I think that for many people on the right, particularly Americans, the absolute slavish devotion their leaders have, not to them, but to a small, quote unquote, Middle Eastern democracy over everything else, is completely and totally absurd. And the idea that we can simply go back, that we can go back to the 90s, which we've roundly mocked the liberals for, the IDW liberals, the true liberals, as you might say, is just as absurd when a conservative says it. And so, to be honest, I think these people are completely and totally doomed. I mean, look, like, sure, there's a lot of ruin in a nation. And in the same way that they are seeming to be desirous to crash the Republican Party, there's a lot of things they can crash that would make your or my life particularly difficult.
If you notice, they've been threatening.
Oh, really? I haven't caught that.
Right? Like for very first time, you're seeing in the discourse, oh, well, if America abandons a Middle Eastern democracy, it will fall apart. It will collapse. Terrible things will happen to it if it abandons this Middle Eastern democracy. And then Mike Huckabee today, who very ignominiously decided to have a lovely reception party for one of the most disgusting traitors and spies, most damaging spies in the last, easily since the Rosenbergs. Trend there. I don't know what to make of the trend, but in spies and names, surnames. But he said, when basically asked about why he decided to have a lovely reception for Jonathan Pollard, it was, America can't abandon this Middle Eastern democracy, because if it does, they will come after us. Excuse me, what? And I think that this is the part of the discourse that at least is happening with them, where there's a portion of their cohort that is further out front than those trying to save it. And by save it, I mean detonating the GOP. They're the ones kind of prepping for, the American Samson option, I guess you could say. Because I think you're right, Mr. Burden. I think there is really no way that they pull out of this. Because there was a lot of, when did it happen? There was a lot of commotion on Twitter about 6 or 8 months back, and they really clamped the hammer down hard on the discourse, and many people were blackpilling. I think this was at the time as, they were trying to authenticate everyone, and there was a big push for the removal of anonymity, and everyone was really upset, and basically like, oh, we are going to live under a Middle Eastern democracy panopticon. And I try to tell everybody that may be true, but for the very first time, and why you see them freaking out and making so many unforced errors, which there are so many, they're under a panopticon now too, for the very first time. Like we just talked about, like what institutions they have control over. And I would argue that the institutions that they have control over become severely limited and substantially damaged in their efficacy and value by their very control over them. So basically, in this rise of anti-Semitism that Barry Weiss and Ben Shapiro are intent on fighting against, the best way they could think of doing that is having a very large forum with all of the key neocons, quote unquote, from all aspects of government, finance, business, civil society, and from both sides of the aisle. So basically, we're going to get all of the neocons, left and right, all right, public and private, and we're going to put them all in a room, and we're going to call it, I think it's like the JWC or WJC. I think it stands for World Neocon Council. And we're going to have big panel discussions about how we're going to solve these problems. And basically they lay out exactly what you and I just laid out as hypotheticals. Not so much the tanking of the midterms on purpose, but everything up to that point, and then in the hypotheticals we approached afterwards. And their bright idea is to live stream this on YouTube for all of us to turn into hot clips. They're not used to operating under any type of scrutiny. And now that the scrutiny is applied, these institutions become meaningless. They tried to clamp down on heritage. All they did was blow up heritage. And everybody knew why it was blowing up. Wait, I can't say no to Shabbat dinner, but I'm a Catholic. Are you forcing me to obey your, like, what's going on now? So they, in their attempt to control these institutions, they destroy the credibility of these institutions. And they don't understand that nature abhors a vacuum. Because let's say they tank the Republican Party. The Republican Party's dead. There is no more GOP on the ballot. What rises in its place? And will that be far worse? They do this every time. Like if you cancel guys, like let's say Mark Levin got his wish list, you cancel Tucker Carlson and Nick. What rises in their place?
Well, exactly. And I think that this is an interesting point when we regard the term woke right. Because in my mind, there's sort of this typical back and forth pivot where you could use the left as sort of cultural acid.
A sandwich, you might say.
One might say. And then at the point where that language of privilege started to get uncomfortable, you could pivot back to the right, back and forth. But that depended on a controlled left and a completely and totally controlled right. Now, look, we got to understand, the left is not our friends. They don't want the same thing as us. But the thing is, ultimately, given the sort of inevitable trend of left-wing politics, it eventually sort of becomes cancerous and uncontrollable. Right? At a certain point, you can't control the rate at which acid eats away at your foundation anymore. It's just going.
Bio-Leninism.
100%. Right? And I think this is the explanation for the intense crackdowns we saw across the world of higher education with regard to the Palestinian protests. Right? Yeah, sure. From a certain level, they were able to get what they wanted done. But there are still, and I don't think this is a good thing, populations which are uncorrallable for them. They're bringing in people from places in the world who have a long-rooted distaste for neocons. How about we leave it at that? So there's that, right? That is, I think, from a certain perspective, escaping their control. Now, on the right, they've been able to say, look at these crazy. You don't want that, right? So you know, you better basically oppose them. And well, they don't like this, so you must like it, and sort of use that back and forth. And we see that already, right? The language of woke right is to tie us, the woke right, to the crazy blue-haired feminists, right? To sort of pull on that Pavlovian response to say, treat them the same way. But there are several problems here. One, as you've said, that that pattern depends on their influence being largely subtle, unseen,
not
right?
not comedic.
100%. And the problem is, and look, we'll give Tucker as well as many other people credit, it's sort of hit escape velocity. Like, I'm sorry, at the point where you have, figures like Sean Ryan, who I certainly have my questions about, given his meteoric rise to fame and self-admitted history of CIA drug trafficking, right? Well, when you have him
As one
talking to guys
does.
from the USS Liberty, yeah, just you sort of fall into it, right? I mean, I've done it before. You go on vacation, you come back a drug kingpin, like he was without sin.
Every time I go on vacation, I have to fight off the urge to not come back a drug kingpin. I could see how a man would fall into it.
100%. Yeah, it's it's a regular stumbling block. But point is, when you have someone like that talking to sailors aboard the USS Liberty, when you have Tucker, when you have even someone as relatively unserious as comedians like Theo Vaughn, right, talking about Israel, like you have hit the level of saturation, right? Especially among people of a certain age. Now, this is a critique I'll throw at you, Stormy. I don't necessarily share this, but I think it's an interesting one. You see people saying, well, look, the reason that odious figures, people that, some, particularly older people, have an instinctive reaction are being mainstreamed by the New York Times, but others, such as, Candace Owens, are being massively pushed, is to tar and feather anyone associated with those ideas. They're saying, oh, well, the reason they're promoting, people like Candace Owens is to create the association between, her claiming that Brigitte Macron is a man, that the French government hired people to kill her, in the same breath as she says things like, the U.S. has an undue level of deference to Israel. Do you think that is accurate? Do you think that there is a desire to basically promote deliberately stupid versions to create sort of the loose change narrative, if you will, surround?
Yes. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Our enemy always elevates the counterparty it wishes to fight and not the one that wants to fight it.
I mean, you see this with Richard Spencer, for example.
Yep. Dickie Spencer, as Thomas 777 calls it, who on a old Glory Club, I believe, election night special, said the funniest thing in the world, which I will not repeat here, but Dickie Spencer is
honestly.
He
He was talking to actually someone who will probably be on the podcast immediately after this, Bird from Timeline Earth, which I think is possibly the best comedy pairing in history, the two of them. But yeah, you can dig back through.
I would listen.
Yeah, you can dig back through, listener, and find what we're referring to. But anyway, right.
How do we set up the Bird Thomas 777 podcast? I would listen to the Thomas Bird Comedy Hour. I would drop whatever I was doing.
See, the funny thing is, there's like a 50-50 shot that it'd either be a conversation about like the most like raunchy, like horrible slop culture from the 20th century, or a very erudite discussion of like Thomistic philosophy. And genuinely, I'm not sure which one it would be. And I think that would make it interesting. But in all seriousness,
because you get both.
Well, as someone who's built a middling online business over mixing incredibly serious, incredibly stupid topics together, there is an audience for it. But to get back to the subject at hand, that idea of pushing the enemy they wish to fight, I think is an interesting one. And look, like, I'm always interested to see that pattern repeated. Like one of the examples, and I don't want to just lob bombs at this guy,
George
but I
Lincoln
think
Rockwell.
yeah. Actually, that's a very good one, right? This sort of like cartoonishly racist figure, who is odious, just kind of on like first whiff. Another one I would say is Alex Jones, right? Someone
Yep.
who did genuine reporting on something like Bohemian Grove, and in many cases is directionally completely correct, but he becomes they're turning the frogs gay, which is, I mean, not literally true, but there are chemicals in the water that are doing weird things to the reproduction of frogs. It's just when you get a fat man to get red in the face and chimp out while screaming about it, that becomes a ridiculous thing to say.
Mm-hmm. And look what Nick has kind of done since his elevation. He has kind of cucked on a lot of the things about remigration, things like that. But the one thing he's kept steady is this combative nature with the neocon occupied government and its nature, but at the same time attacking people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is it's just very illogical behavior, right? So like I think my first podcast appearance with you, we talked about information asymmetry and kind of how like investors think. And one of the things you do is you got to find out where to look and what information matters. So if you have a little mental map of how the world works, how things work, and then you see something that makes absolutely no sense, right? Like this does not work in my model of things. That means that there is something happening that you don't understand, because it obviously is happening. You can see it. So that means there is a piece of information that you are not aware of. And that tells you where to look. Because if everything just operated according to plan, so to speak, right, that tells you your model is working. You know all the things. There's nothing outside of your strategic vantage point that you need addressing. And there's certain things about how and what issues or what hills he chooses to die on that I find incongruous. It's the same thing with the woke right. Like, okay, this is a term without a definition. It is laughably bad. And it is happening at the eddy of these people's, particularly these messengers' credibility. So why? Like, this does not make sense in my model. And I think there is a lot with the people who have kind of become the scapegoat, so to speak, of this woke rightness. If you can't attack Tucker, which you can't, he's the most popular media figure literally in the world right now, and you can't attack the vice president of the United States, right? Even though he may have these ideas in private, there is no evidence that he has them in public, or else you would have made that evidence public already. You wouldn't have waited this long. You would have done that before he ended up in the VP seat. Well, then you need to create people that are attackable, that are odious. I'm not saying Nicholas J. Fuentes is one of these people. He probably isn't. Right? But if you can't create them, or you don't want to create them, you go out and find them and you elevate them. These people don't have to be in on the plan, right? Donald Trump doesn't know that, Donald Trump isn't part of the let's tank the 2026 election plan. I mean, maybe he's aware of it now that he wants to fire Susie Wiles before New Year's, but only person you needed in that entire administration to know the plan was Susie Wiles. Everybody else is just muddling through it, doing their day-to-day, none the wiser. So anybody from Candace Owens to Fuentes doesn't actually have to be privy to this or in on it in any way for it to work.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. As we sort of round out the hour, there's something I want to ask you because
Oh, we should talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene resigning and all of the other
yes,
Republican congressmen saying that they're going to resign.
yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think this
So
actually further proves your idea that they're trying to get out ahead of it, which means we need to get out ahead of it too. Hold on one second.
100%. And actually, so I'll just rant for a little bit while you go fix that. For those who aren't aware, Marjorie Taylor Greene has announced she will be resigning effective January something of next year. And initially, it's kind of confusing, right? You're trying to figure out like what's going on here because she has been feuding with the president, particularly over Israel. Look, I find Marjorie Taylor Greene to be particularly irritating, so I am far from her greatest fan. But I didn't really think anything of it until I saw a tweet from Christopher Sandbach, who is uniquely insightful. And he basically said, horrible paraphrase, his version of this was much more intelligent. She has the best advisors ever. Her advisors see what's happening, that the Republican Party is going to crash. And she will be able to insulate herself from that, let the dust settle, and then come back in untarred by that disaster. So basically, she's taking a payday. She's going to go out, get on a podcast, get some money, kick her feet up, and then wait. Now, look, she's making a bet there. It's not a sure thing, but I think it's a good bet. And I think that the reason other people, and this is rumored, right? We don't have anyone who signed their name on the dotted line and said, I'm out, is basically a desire to skip out on the bloodbath, basically to take your ball and go home and survive to fight another day. So that's what I think is going on there, Stormy.
You can't blame it on the woke right in Congress, the America First group. Hold on.
Right. You can't blame it on the woke right if the woke right's gone. And so I
Yeah,
think that's
if the woke right
particularly
picks up its ball and goes home beforehand, which I think gives us okay, so this is another thing. There are certain other people in our spheres that I don't know if you've noticed, but they try and push a blinding allegiance to Trump, right? The refusal for anybody to get off the reservation. And I think the purpose of that is to keep you here for the bloodbath, because that's necessary. If you picked up your ball and went home, then they can't use you as a scapegoat. It doesn't work. You have to be part of the Trump coalition for the Trump coalition to crash and burn. If you are off the plantation, then they can't blame it on you. And it is vital that they do. So I think the loyalty, so to speak, is the Trump loyalty enforcers, the people that are very intent on everyone staying on the Trump train no matter what. And if you criticize the administration in any way, then, you're disloyal. You're part of the problem. I think those guys are going to get us in a lot of trouble because I think we should be taking Marjorie Taylor Greene's lead. And I think it's going to involve us actually making that decision consciously. Because not a lot of people are going to want to do it. It's going to seem really disloyal. But this takes their ball away from them.
Well, and to that point, we already saw this happen in the UK with the No Seats movement, right? Basically, desire to punish the Conservative Party by giving them nothing, by taking away everything from them. And look, reform is certainly compromised. They have their own allegiances, and I think Nigel Farage is too much of a boomer. But it basically has majorly changed the political landscape. All right, fair enough. One thing, Stormy, and then I'll let you go. People responded to a lot of your commentary about Trump from a year ago, basically saying that you were the planned truster in chief. You had sort of this unrealistic, overly positive view of the Trump administration, particularly as regards his relationship to the state of Israel. So obviously you and I have been talking the entire time, so I'm aware of the, the nuance of your position. But first, I guess would say, like, how do you respond to those allegations? And two, do you think there's anything that you got wrong there? Stormy, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just switching headphones there for a second. Battery was dying. So with Trump, it seems to be bearing out, right? So what I was hoping for is that our coalition would win, right? So,
Hey, Stormy,
and
before you go on, you just started roboting hard.
oh yeah, I switched mics. How does it sound now?
Oh, you're good. You're good. I just wanted to let you know before you went on a rant that sounded like Megatron.
Oh, okay. So what I was hoping for doesn't seem to be what we're getting. And what I mean by that is, so prior to my statements about the Trump admin, for a long time when Trump was not in power, it was Joe Biden land, was that the power structure is not a monolith, right? That there are factions within it. This seems obvious now, but 3 years ago, 2 years ago, it very much was not obvious. And, thankfully, academic agent has come over to my line of thinking that there are clearly factions fighting for the Trump administration, right? Fighting for control of Trump. And I was hoping, especially in the first 60 to 90 days, that our faction was winning out. When I say our faction, like none of these guys are really our faction, right? But they're different and they don't hate us, which I can work with, right? So, I mean, people view politics in our sphere, which is very confusing, the same way voters do, right? Like, oh, this is a politician and I support this guy and not that guy. When it comes to president of the United States, it's not a man at all, right? He is just a figurehead for hundreds and hundreds of people and dozens of interest groups. So inside the Trump administration, unlike in the Joe Biden administration, I saw conflict, right? People jostling for control of the microphone, which was the first I had seen that in at least my lifetime, right? Where it wasn't unified neocon Reich. And it seems that while that is true, our faction, at least as it is now, when I say our faction, I'll just say my faction, the faction I was hoping to come out on top, doesn't seem to be. So with Trump, you get JD Vance, you get Elon, you get Thiel, you get Musk, right? These people are obviously different people. You get Tucker, right? These are different people than Mark Levin, Susie Wiles, Mike Huckabee, people like that. They're both in the same administration, right? So plan trusting is kind of stupid because it connotates that Donald Trump, the man, is the person that you're trusting blindly. The guy basically doesn't exist, as Susie Wiles can show you with just by controlling who the dude meets with. You can basically control what he says. And this is why the commentary out of the Trump administration has shifted really, really far the other direction and not a really great direction. So yeah, my initial enthusiasm about the Trump administration was for the very first time you had people there that had an opposite agenda. Will those people come out on top? I don't know. I mean, as of right now, it looks like the neocon team is taking tons of L's, and there were a lot of W's that these guys got in early on, right? There's the same people that told me I was a plan truster also told me that we were going to war with Iran, and it was beyond a shadow of a doubt. Things are already happening. We're basically on the ground already. And now here we are, 8 months into the great American-Iranian war. There are hundreds of thousands of men killed on both. No, none of that happened. None of it did. Right? And if their own reporting is to be believed, it was people like J.D. Vance, Hegseth, and Charlie Kirk that made that not happen against almost insurmountable pressure to make that happen. Like, you want to know why he got all those neocon bucks? Well, it was for that, and that didn't happen. That was the only ask of the Trump administration by the Middle Eastern democracy fans, all right, was to turn the other way on a war that was already happening in Gaza, all right? And you need to do war in Iran. You need to take out our only regional competitor. We've been waiting a very long time. And that didn't happen. The other thing that was supposed to happen, but didn't, was we were supposed to go to war in Ukraine. And that didn't happen either. So, I mean, we did take a lot of L's recently. I'm really thankful that at least the initial, the faction that I was hoping could do a lot. In the first 90 days, they did. And if anything else, just them keeping us out of Iran is good, frankly. But I think what's going to come next is going to really, because the one thing that we didn't talk about is how metastable is this, right? We have a very tentative tug of war session happening right now over the heart of the administration. But what happens if there's any type of pronounced crisis, like let's say a financial one? What happens then? Right? How stable or durable is either of these power structures? We know what one power structure will do. We watched it in 2008. But what about this new faction? Like, it's kind of exciting, because I don't think the Shapiro-Levin coalition has the ability of surviving any type of crisis. I think the American people are hurting so much to a point now where if anything tips further and makes that situation worse, I think it'll be catastrophic for them.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Effectively, that their dominance was dependent on an immense amount of surplus in the system. It was dependent on people, generally feeling like things were trending up in the right direction. And look, like, I think it's important to recognize, and a lot of people who bash boomers get this wrong. We got to understand that the people in that generation, despite being relatively wealthy now, went through a lot of troubling economic times. Right, the 70s weren't particularly pleasant, to put it mildly. There was a rough turn in the 90s. Another, obviously the .com, crash, 2008. And so, like, obviously each one of those was individually nasty. But from talking to people who lived through it, there was never really this feeling that, like, oh, the walls are really coming, or the walls are sort of coming in, the wheels are coming off. Like, America is on the ropes.
Fucked.
And yeah, and additionally, I think that there's another thing to be said for the fact that, like, when we talk about houses, and you and I have been talking about this, Stormy, this is maybe a discussion for another day. Houses, like owning a house, is sort of a totem of a bunch of other things. What it really means is, will I be able to be a respectable member of society with something at stake? Is there some way I can index myself so that I have a stake in the system as it exists? That's just off the table for a large number of people. And that's a very real problem. Because before, there was always the combined carrot and stick of, like, well, yeah, we will both, you have the opportunity to retire, you have benefits, you have things that sort of keep you on the straight and narrow. And also, you have a lot to lose. And I think the problem is, and look, I'm not talking about some sort of 1776 will commence again. But the problem is, it's like, look, like when the consequences for being doxxed, when the consequences for being, socially ostracized by Con Inc. get lower because people simply have less to lose, that soft power goes away. The power of bribery goes away. And yeah, to me, I think that ultimately these people are floundering, especially this kind of bastardized conservative movement. If
Oh,
for
it's
no
they
other
demand
reason
to
the
stay
fact
in
that they're
control. Go on.
well, just also due to the fact that they're all mentally challenged. Like Mark
Yes.
Levin is not a capable political operator. He is a raving lunatic. And to your point, he keeps saying things that Joseph Goebbels couldn't pay him to say voluntarily. It's like that old meme, right? Reacting to the sewer tunnels, where it says, Goebbels couldn't have made this with $1 billion. Joking about
Nope.
the nature of that propaganda. And I think that is another problem for them. Well,
Well,
Stormy,
so
we were
they demand to stay in charge at the same time as they demand that they should not be expected to have a solution. It's fundamentally unworkable. And to real quick, as far as predictions that I did get right, the housing market situation, I mean, 2 years ago, I think actually when you and I first started talking privately, I talked about at a certain, in about 2 or 3 years, there is not going to be enough boomers to support the housing market, right? So you have a functional problem. Like, yes, the boomers are spending through your inheritance, but they're not going to be able to spend through all of it, even though it may seem that way, cruise after cruise or whatever else they do, Margaritaville, it doesn't fucking matter, right? They're going to pass on some form of wealth to you. A lot of now that we fucking know 100 million people have landed on our shores illegally and legally in the last 20 years. That's literally 1/3 of the population. 1/3. Right? These people haven't been here long enough to accumulate assets. And what dollars they have been able to scrape together, they send back home because they're not fucking from here. So that means that there's going to be a bit of a generational turnover, right? So the existing Americans, the real Americans, they will be inheriting either wealth or assets. And a large portion of Americans, literally 1/3, are not going to have it. They're not going to have that happen. All right? So something happens to asset prices when, like, let's say right now, if you go to native born Americans of your generation, right, this kind of hides in the statistics. It was really hard for me to suss out because the census, when it talks about population numbers, it lumps everyone in together. So if I want to go like, what is the percentage, like how many Gen Zers are there? How many boomers are there? How many millennials are there? It doesn't let me break down those cohorts ethnically. That took a lot of work, but was able to do it. And there is 5 times as many, 4.25 times as many boomers as there are born Americans, people like you and me. Well, that's a problem because how do you sell 4.25 houses to a single person? You don't, right? One of two things have to happen. Either that person spontaneously turns into 4 people, or the price you are asking to sell your house has to be reduced by a factor of 3 people, right? So it's either 60% markdown, 70% markdown, or 3 people spontaneously appear. And the problem with the importing people to spontaneously make them appear route is those people actually don't accumulate enough capital to buy shit. That's a problem. So the other thing, I mean, this just sounds like, oh, it's boomer house prices. But Jay, you don't know a lot about finance, but you know enough. What happens to mortgages? They get put into, books with hundreds of other mortgages, and they get sold as assets called mortgage-backed securities. Two things hold up the financial market: mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. Well, if we know mortgage-backed securities are about to be real fucked up, pardon my French, what about treasuries? Well, here lies another problem, and one that I did want to talk to you briefly about it. So this is as good a place as any, and I'd like to get your thoughts, and we can close on that. The other one is treasury bonds. Everyone should get a chance to hold a treasury bill at least once in their life. They are very, very, very pretty IOUs. I mean, they have gold leaf and silver leaf, and it's really nice. But on them, it says that it's backed up, right? So this IOU is backed by the future tax revenue of the United States. Okay. Well, who's that? And in this H-1B, tumult, in the SNAP benefit tumult, and really the state of the discourse the last 3 or 4 months, a lot of information about who is a taker and who is a maker in the economy. So who takes tax dollars, who makes them? And it just so happens, Jay, that 82% of all tax revenue collected by the United States comes from men that look like you and me and no one else. So at what point do men like you and me say, well, okay, you blew up the Republican Party. These other people hate me. And no matter who gets into government, my government is going to hate me. Why do I continue funding this? Because if the white guys stop paying taxes, just like that mortgage-backed security market, yes, the government grinds to a halt, but all of a sudden U.S. treasuries have no value. And that's what the global financial system runs on. So what I've been thinking about more and more is the pocket veto that we have. And this is why it took only crisis for that information to come out of who actually pays the fucking bills. And if you go and you build the entire global financial system on those bills, you have created a leverage point for people like me and you. Fine, you can basically nuke all of our people that we want in office. You can Charlie Kirk the ones you don't cancel. You can deny us representation. But at the end of the day, all of this stops tomorrow if we simply just don't open our checkbook.
Yeah, so there are several things there. I mean, I think that is, when we're talking about the deal being offered, that's sort of what we're talking about. This is something that, Dave Green has mentioned multiple times, when talking to people like this. He's like, all right, just tell me what deal you're offering me. Because what it basically sounds like the deal is for you and I, it is basically, we're going to take your money, use it for the benefit of other people, all while discriminating against you and your children for the crime of being productive members of society. Oh, yeah. And also, a large portion of that isn't even unproductive members of your own society, but another one, right? Halfway across the world. Now, look, there are few things as dangerous to suggest as a tax rebellion, right? That's a very, very good way to get a knock on the door. But
yep. And I don't think that's what we should do, but just simply just reminding voters of it, or reminding legislators of it.
Well, and I think that this is something uh we've already seen with the tech crowd, right? Why is Silicon Valley invested in right-wing politics? Because to be honest, the left started being so retarded that it became very unlikely that you could continue to be a tech billionaire if they were in charge.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that that is very much, a a possible situation that same idea will spread to other sections of industry. Now, I will say, and you and I have spoken about the UK at length before, uh, it's a whole hell of a lot worse there, and those rich people haven't gotten to that point yet. Right? They fled the country, which we may start to see as well.
Well, you can't if you're a U.S. person. That's the thing. The U.S. is a tax haven for the rest of the world. But if you make your money in the U.S., you don't get to leave. The U.S. will chase you to every corner of the world. So what?
That's like the lobster pot,
that
right?
is exactly. The U.S. is a roach motel, right? For money. I'm dead serious. Like right now, if I
Yeah.
have I have a friend in Hong Kong, let's say, who wants to give me $100 million as like a wedding present or something like that. He can give me $100 million and I will pay zero tax on it. I say to the government, say it's called the foreign gift tax exemption. You can look it up. Use it. You can go and say, hey, Mr. Government, I've gotten $100 million for free from someone else far away. Now, how much do I owe you? Government's going to say, no, nothing. Because it wants to put zero barriers between money coming in the system. But if you ever try and take it out, or you try and move it somewhere else, then all hell breaks loose. So it is quite literally a roach motel for money. Money can come in, no problem at all. But when money tries to leave, the US government will chase you to the ends of the earth. Ask Roger Ver. So
Yeah, so
our
I don't
rich
know.
people don't have that
I mean,
option.
yeah.
They're trapped in here with us.
So who knows, right? Genuinely, who knows on that front? I mean, I think that the the ultimate problems of scale are accurate, right? There's just simply too many takers, too few producers with the kind of like welfare Ponzi scheme, let alone, right, as regards the welfares that the boomers benefit from. Things like obviously healthcare for seniors, but also Social Security. And that becomes particularly poignant if we do see a massive correction in real estate. Because let's be honest, for the average boomer, 70% of their net worth is in their house. And yeah, sure, there are those who squander that on cruises and the like. But the idea that you're going to fund an additional, 20 years of life on 30% of your net worth, well, all of a sudden those government programs become very, very important. That's not like icing on the cake. That is, do you survive or not? So, I mean, I think that sort of like catabolic, I guess, decay. I mean, there's definitely something to it. Like I said, I don't know enough about finance. Like that, I find the picture you're painting to me to be convincing, but like, it's not my game.
No, I mean,
And
just
also, I
the
will
sheer number
say,
of obligations you have to.
oh
If you
yeah,
want
well,
people to reduce the headcount right now, right, you're basically, as the boomers go away. I mean, boomers still have to pay taxes on Social Security. You get a Social Security check, you have to pay taxes on it. All their money in their retirement fund, their IRA, their 401k, when they take it out, they have to pay taxes on it, capital gains. So
right, which
as
admittedly
the
isn't the
boomers
same kind of
die
taxes
off,
that you and I pay, but like that's still a
well,
huge
that
source
you
of.
pay.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
All my money is capital gains, but yes.
and all of mine is 1099. And oh boy, do I really love paying FICA taxes.
Yes.
Uh,
Nobody gets fucked in the American system like the small business owner.
oh, did you try and do what you're supposed to and better yourself and build something? Well, guess what? Get
Yep.
ready, because we're going to collect our pound of flesh. But to that
Oh,
point,
you want to
Stormy,
start your own business? We're going to make it impossible for you to get a mortgage.
yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, Stormy. But couldn't you also say that has effectively been the Chamber of Commerce Republican Party plank for a long time? Like, obviously
100%.
taken out of racial terms, but still, like you, small business American. That's a new euphemism. You small business American, you are being screwed. Let's go in there and smash up welfare. And I mean, look, like you could even say, look at Doge, right, which was shuttered today officially. Like that
Yep.
was an extension of that same idea of like, well, we'll go in there with an axe and start cutting. Like, I'm not saying that that isn't an accurate feeling, but like, I don't know if that will produce dramatic electoral results just because we've seen that experiment run before.
No. And if the boomers die off, just like the housing prices, their tax dollars stop going in the machine. So they're on a time clock no matter what, right? You can't support the massive welfare state, and you can't support all these people here that are basically dependents. You could, with the boomers, cashing out the 401k only. The 401k isn't taxable on its way up, right? It allows you to make money in your 401k, provided you don't ever take it out until you're retired. But then when you take it out to live on in retirement, right, then you are taxed on it as if it's money you made yesterday. So all of these boomers in retirement are quite literally keeping the stock market where it is, right? They're paying the bill, they're paying taxes along with working white people. So as the boomers die off, there simply isn't enough of us. Even if this is like I wasn't inciting a tax rebellion. I think that would be kind of libertarian and unfortunate if that's actually what got people to, toss off the regime. That would be really gay. But it just points up to a problem. Like, there is not enough of us. There simply isn't. If the boomers go away, as they are at a exponentially growing rate, their tax dollars go away. Their consumption tax dollars go away. Their consumption period goes away. The only people buying houses right now are boomers. The only people buying cars right now are boomers. The only people buying new TVs, new refrigerators, new anything else are boomers. And they're going away. All right. So they're funding the government largely, along with us working slaves. But they're doing most of the buying. So if you have a consumption-led economy, you're in a really bad place as this goes with this many dependents, right? So like, unless they reverse course, right? Unless they allow people with our type of politics in, because we're the only ones advocating for it. That tiny group, they only care about that place in the Middle East. They will literally crash and burn this whole thing just to keep that flow of capital to their place going. So, like you're talking about like the tech elites, things like that, like the hour of decision is kind of coming, right? Like, these group of people will keep out the people that want to fix things, because those people that want to fix things, they particularly don't want to keep funding this other place. So we have to keep them out because they won't fund this other place. But like you said about Mark Levin, these are unserious, unintelligent people that only got to where they are through various types of nepotism and, like Ben Shapiro, a very gated, very policed sandbox. So they're not people with solutions. But it is imperative to them that the people with solutions are kept out. And it seems that, I thought it would be Trump, and this is a big mea culpa for me. I thought it would be in the lens of the Trump administration that either that faction wins out, or we'll call it tech faction, wins out, or the foreign nation in the Middle East becomes so unpalatable, it will force a heel turn in the administration. because that was my big Trump prediction, right? That Trump is going to be the guy that'll be like the first president to turn away from Zionism. What I didn't, basically by the rate at which it's growing, awareness, I guess, to the problem, which you can use like Rogers' theorem to track out. But I think it's going to be this Congress that it happens and not the presidency. Ted Cruz just got booed off stage today at a fundraiser put together for him at a Christian university in like Texas or something. Right? Like, allegiance to this state is a campaign destroyer. So I don't know how that factors in with the whole, like, we're gonna tank the midterms on purpose. I think that's why Marjorie Taylor Greene and everyone is stepping back. I think to her political, like, A, it dodges the Samson option. But B, when you come back in, you can actually talk about the stuff you want to talk about. Because it seems that, like, I mean, just look at Thomas Massey's success. Him taking zero AIPAC dollars. He raised more money than he's ever raised before when Miriam Adelson and Paul Singer the Zionists came after him. He raised money from everywhere across the country. Like, I think this is going to be a really big thing in electoral politics. I think allegiance to this place is going to be career suicide. Just like it is in media.
I mean, look, here's hoping, man. We are well over time. I'll be
Every
sure
time.
Yeah, I know, really. You
Every
and I were on the
single
phone for
time,
like
you could
2
say.
hours the other day, and my wife was, like looking out the back window, watching me, rake leaves while we were talking, and she was like, "Well, what did you guys talk about?" And I was like, I don't know, like 6 different things. There was gun autism, a brief digression about cars, international finance, black magic. What didn't we talk about? But in all seriousness, I enjoyed having you on. You have been posting sort of audio essays to your Substack, which I'll be sure
Oh, yeah, I
to
do
link
Substack
as well
now.
as your Twitter. Yeah, you do. That is actually you. So I'll be sure to link to your Substack. But yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was not an encouraging conversation, but I think an interesting one.
I think so, really. I mean, we're talking about like this. Who was that guy? Who was that guy that like set himself on fire for Palestine or whatever?
Aaron Bushnell.
We're literally watching all of our enemies Aaron Bushnell themselves.
Which I think it's very funny that apparently the only people who remember Aaron Bushnell is the online right. Like, we're the ones who still make fun of him, but other than that, his memory has just died, which is, I guess,
Quick question.
poetic. Yeah.
Quick question. Do you think we on the right have the ability to do what Marjorie Taylor Greene did and not become pawns in this? Basically, do we have to jump ship like she did only to remove that option from them? Do you think actually that we have the collective, I guess you could say the collective conscious mind to make that happen?
I don't know the answer to that because, I mean, as far as like people listening to this podcast, 100%. The right wing writ large, I don't know the answer to that. Because I think what will probably happen is that the vast majority of people won't even have entertained that idea intellectually. It'll simply be a sense of creeping apathy. Like, what's even the point? I think that's what we saw with the election where Labor swept. That it wasn't that, the vast majority of people said, I have heard about this campaign on the internet, no seats, and I've decided not to do it. But it's been, the conservatives were in power for 14 years. Every aspect of my life has gotten worse. I don't like Keir Starmer, but I just can't be bothered. And I think that's what we will see, especially because, remember, Stormy, what are the demographics that push Trump to victory? Well, it is Gen X, right? The largest conservative bulwark in America. It's certainly true. But also, it's men under 30. And
Yep.
that magic is gone. Like well and truly gone, especially
Agreed.
if what we expect to happen happens, and that they, the so-called woke right, are made the whipping boy of both the right and the left. I think that will create a sense of apathy in itself. Because let's be honest, man, I really hate the Republicans, but like you could literally put a gun to my head, and I would not vote for Kamala Harris. I just wouldn't.
Yep.
I refuse to assent to someone like that. So even out of spite, and don't get me wrong, Story, there's a lot of spite I have towards, the GOP. I just wouldn't do it. I just would not vote. And so I think that
Yeah.
is more likely to be the reaction, less so that people decide, I'll take it to the wire, I will punish you. But I think it will produce the same effect.
So the only way to get out in front of it then is to call it out and say these guys are
100%. What are
trying
we
to
doing now?
deliberately. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, look, man, I was actually listening back because I always want to check, because I think it's easy to edit your statements in your mind. Be like, oh, I always knew what I knew now.
Yes.
I've been going back to, because Thomas and I have, Mind Phaser, which is our current events podcast, and it's every 2 weeks, and there aren't that many episodes of it. Like we're up to about 30. But it's been going for over a year now. And it's actually pretty helpful because it lets you track with a pretty high degree of specificity how you evolved over time. And so I was going back and listening to our coverage of the 2024 election. And I want to just say, one, you didn't have to be a genius, but I called that Trump was going to win very, very early because we all knew it. But I also said, look, Trump is not coming to save us. Trump is not our guy. And we should effectively realize that, one, we live here. So I would rather live in a Trump America than a Kamala Harris America. That decision needs to be made. But also, take what you can get. And even during the time, like I think the height of my enthusiasm was during the early Doge months, when it seemed as if there was a real effort being made to roll back the administrative state. But very quickly, the problem of the judiciary reared its head, realizing that things would just basically fail to happen, that someone would, some random judge in the middle of nowhere would stop it. And I realized if this doesn't stop, this thing is done. And it was never stopped. And that, which I think was the best that we got, that inclination, aside from the border stuff, which I do think is still a positive, it was done. And to me, this is, in my mind, a long, slow realization. And look, like, are we still better off? Yes. And I think, if anything, in a weird way, going so hard against the woke right has sort of sealed their fate, which I think is doubly ominous. But yeah, man, I went back to check that I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid. And I think that the takes that we have had as a group were largely accurate. And I think that, to your point of the reason why we're doing this now is basically to say, like, put a pin in this. And if and when this happens, don't blame me, right? Don't blame me. We called it out. And so I think that is something that definitely has some promise to it. I think we're looking at the same tea leaves. Who knows? This may be something used to mock us in a year and a half, in which case,
well, what'll be really interesting is watching the tech right. Right. So, okay.
100%.
The judicial coup has happened. The judicial coup says, okay, well, we can't do this because the tech right guys have basically been outside of politics, or not very, very interested, except for maybe Peter Thiel a little bit. Right. And they come into politics thinking like, okay, we just got to get our guy in the White House. Like, we have to do things above board. Right. And they try that. They do it successfully. And then all the judiciaries basically like, no. We're just not going to let you do things that the Constitution says you can do. You silly people thought that this worked how the rules say it works, and it does not. Right? Like, these people don't want to go down with the ship And they definitely don't want to be, I mean, because Dark Enlightenment makes this point a lot, right? Like, doesn't matter how rich you are, if you can't keep the power on, you're just a nerd. Right? The money doesn't mean anything if all this kind of comes crashing down. So you should be just as incentivized as we are. So I wonder now that the above board moves have been kind of taken off the table for them. I think it'll be really interesting. And, obviously they were not able to get control of the Trump administration, to my deep sadness. I think it'll be really interesting what these guys do next. And I think on that note, Mr. Burden, well over time, we are at
Wow, I had a
over an hour
really
and a
funny
half.
joke, but I was muted. That would have been really funny.
Okay, way to.
So it just goes into the ether then. But yes, we are well
Oh.
over time. I'll be sure to link to your stuff, Stormy. As far as my stuff,
Yeah,
if
man.
you are. Can you hear me, Stormy, by the way?
I can. Your mic is working again.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. So, for instance, if you are a billionaire in the aspiring tech right, you can head over to my channels on Patreon, Substack, or Gumroad to get the episodes early and ad-free. This is what I do full-time, so your support helps me keep the lights on. You can find the regular episodes a few days later anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to support us more directly, Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching. As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit under the weather, but nonetheless, I've been continuing to use the workouts JD give me. And I am constantly sore. He just abuses me, but it's for my own good, at least I've been told. Anyway, Stormy.
No, you
I
literally,
appreciate
you deserve to be abused. You have an abusable face.
well, you know what? We're friends like these, right? But anyway, to everyone at home,
Enjoy
keep
Thanksgiving.
your head
man.
up. Yeah, like it lasts forever. Good night.